welcome to the 25th edition of Toke Signals TV, where we bring you the latest in cannabis and hemp news every week. I'm Steve Elliott, your host, the editor of TokeSignals.com, and I'll be guiding you through the news. First of all, let's take a look at some pretty flowers. As is our custom, the Toke TV Bud Pick of the Week this week is a cross between Super Skunk and East Coast Sour Diesel, and a pretty cross it is. You see these lightly purple tinged flowers if you're following along with us visually. These cost $10 a gram, or the bargain price of $1.75 an ounce. Available for delivery in the South Puget Sound area from the Renton Herbalist. Let's do the news now, shall we? We had a distinct trend this week with several different news stories originating from conservative Republican governors who are rebranding themselves now as being more cannabis friendly. This is undoubtedly related to the fact that the GOP is searching for a viable frontrunner for the 2016 presidential election. But no fewer than 3 conservative Republican governors, all 3 of whom have their eye on the White House, 2 of whom have tried in the past, at least 2, made cannabis-friendly statements this week. Let's get into those. In the Lone Star State, Texas Governor Rick Perry said states should be allowed to legalize marijuana. And of course, he's possibly positioning himself for another attempt at the White House. Governor Perry said on Thursday that he believes states should be allowed to legalize marijuana, and that as governor, he has helped move Texas in the direction of decriminalizing it. I am a staunch promoter of the 10th Amendment, Perry said. States should be able to set their own policies on abortion, same-sex marriage, and marijuana legalization. Then people would decide where they want to live. On marijuana legalization, states should be allowed to make those decisions. Perry said that twice. And according to another report by the Austin American-Statesman, Perry also said, after 40 years of the war on drugs, I can't change what happened in the past. What I can do as the governor of the second largest state in the nation is to implement policies that start us toward a decriminalization and keeps people from going to prison and destroying their lives. And that's what we've done over the last decade. We applaud Governor Perry for standing up in support of states' rights to regulate the cultivation and sale of marijuana for adult use, said Chris Lindsay, a legislative analyst with the Marijuana Policy Project. Our marijuana prohibition policies have failed, and it's time to adopt a more sensible policy. Adults should not be punished for using an objectively less harmful substance than alcohol. And as Governor Perry acknowledged, they certainly should not be put in jail or prison, Lindsay said. The second of our 3 governors this week in Louisiana, Governor Bobby Jindal says medical marijuana is okay if it's tightly controlled. He said on Wednesday that he supports making medical marijuana available in Louisiana under strict supervision. I continue to be opposed to the legalization of marijuana, Jindal said during an event at the Pennington Biomedical Research Center. But when it comes to medical marijuana, if there is a legitimate medical need, I'd certainly be open to making it available under very strict supervision for patients that would benefit from that. Jindal said that to be acceptable to him, a proposal would have to put marijuana use under a doctor's care, and that the program would have to be closely monitored to prevent abuse. Medical marijuana advocates were happy that Jindal said he had an open mind on the issue. That's huge, said Marjorie Esmond, executive director for the Louisiana chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union. While Louisiana has a 1991 law on the books allowing medical marijuana, Esmond said that law is unworkable, making it impossible for patients to actually get any cannabis. The 1991 law calls for patients with glaucoma, chemotherapy, and spastic quadriplegia to receive marijuana for therapeutic use. The bill depended on Louisiana's Secretary of Health and Hospitals devising rules and regulations by January 1st, 1992. Apparently those rules were never written. There's no way you can walk into a pharmacy and get what your doctor prescribed if it's marijuana, according to Esmond. Jindal's comments came just one day after a crowded committee hearing at the Capitol on legalizing marijuana. Attendees discussed fixing the state's medical marijuana law and reducing the penalties for repeat cannabis possession offenses. 10 people are reportedly serving life sentences in Louisiana's prisons for fourth and subsequent pot possession charges. These are simple possession charges that 10 men are serving life sentences for. The third of our GOP governors to make cannabis-friendly noises this week, New Jersey Governor Christie says, "We will end the failed war on drugs." The embattled governor is fighting Bridgegate allegations, and he's calling for alternatives to incarceration and expanded drug treatment. Governor Christie on Tuesday took the oath of office for a second term, and he delivered his inaugural address at the War Memorial in Trenton, New Jersey. During his inaugural address, he called for an end to the drug war, and he called for compassion for those suffering from drug addiction. Since Christie has, for years, his entire first term actually, dragged his feet regarding the implementation of the medical marijuana program in New Jersey, one has to view his statements with a certain skepticism. Drug policy reform advocates applauded the governor's remarks, though, even as cynics derided Christie for what they called a desperate attempt to draw public attention away from the Bridgegate scandal, which is threatening to derail Christie's presidential ambitions. Christie had been the front runner for the GOP nomination until the scandal broke recently. Christie's sudden conversion to the position of drug war reformer is particularly startling, coming as it does after 4 solid years of obstructionism and foot dragging when it comes to New Jersey's medical marijuana program. That program was signed into law by Christie's predecessor, Governor John Corzine, on Corzine's last day in office. Many patients have been left in the lurch by Christie's neglect of and active opposition to the medical marijuana program. We will end the failed war on drugs that believes that incarceration is the cure of every ill caused by drug abuse, Governor Christie said during his inaugural speech on Tuesday morning. We will make drug treatment available to as many of our nonviolent offenders as we can, and we will partner with our citizens to create a society that understands this simple truth: every life has value, and no life is disposable, Christie said. The governor expressed his desire to help, in a bipartisan manner, those struggling with drug addiction. And while the government has a role in ensuring the opportunity to accomplish these dreams, we have now learned that we have an even bigger role to play as individual citizens, Governor Christie said. We have to be willing to play outside the red and blue boxes the media and pundits put us in. We have to be willing to reach out to others who look or speak differently than us. We have to be willing to personally reach out a helping hand to a neighbor suffering from drug addiction, depression, or the dignity-stripping loss of a job. Governor Christie's inaugural remarks were applauded by Roseanne Scotti, New Jersey State Director for the Drug Policy Alliance. I was delighted to be present for the governor's swearing in and to hear him make such promising remarks surrounding drug policy reform in our state, she said. Legislation is desperately needed to reverse the counterproductive and discriminatory consequences of the failed war on drugs, Scotti said. The Drug Policy Alliance and advocates throughout New Jersey look forward to meeting with the Christie administration to address the unacceptable and unjust consequences of the drug war. In Illinois this week, implementation of the medical marijuana law recently approved by the legislature there, we learned that patients would lose their gun rights under the new rules for medical marijuana in Illinois. Illinois medical marijuana patients will have to be fingerprinted, they'll have to undergo a background check, and they'll need to pay $150 a year for registration under rules proposed by state officials on Tuesday. And they would also give up their Second Amendment right to own a gun. The plan details how adults with 41 specified medical conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and complex regional pain syndrome, may apply to get a medical marijuana patient registry ID card, which entitles them to buy medicinal cannabis. These proposed rules are expected to be expanded over the course of the next year. They govern how medical marijuana can be legally grown, sold, and purchased in Illinois. The Illinois Department of Public Health is accepting comments on the rules until February the 7th, at which point they will be submitted to a legislative panel for approval by the end of April. Most of these rules deal with how patients can qualify for an ID card to buy up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana every 2 weeks, or more if a doctor specifically certifies that more is necessary. But one controversial proposal says that qualifying patients or caregivers may not possess firearms, even if they have an Illinois gun owner's ID card or concealed carry permit. Violators will be subject to arrest by state police under the proposed rules. If patients were expecting any help from the right-wing gun lobby, the National Rifle Association, dream on. That organization doesn't have enough of a backbone to support medicinal cannabis patients' gun rights. They seem much more concerned about the Second Amendment rights of mass murderers than those of medical marijuana patients. Todd Vandermeide, a lobbyist for the NRA, said the organization, quote, takes no position on the issue, but that the rule seems to be an attempt to interpret federal law. A firearms application form from the U.S. Department of Justice asks if the buyer is an unlawful user of marijuana or other controlled substances. The proposed rules make it clear that marijuana is still illegal under federal law, and Illinois denies liability for any damages arising from the medicinal cannabis program, including federal prosecution. It presents a novel legal conundrum, according to Vandermeide. The courts are going to have to reconcile it. Patients could designate a caregiver to legally buy and carry cannabis for them. Patients and caregivers will undergo background checks by the Illinois State Police. They'd be rejected for any violent felony conviction or for possession of any controlled substance, including marijuana, which means patients who were self-medicating before the law passed and then got busted could ironically be ineligible for the damn stuff now that it's legal. Fortunately, a proposed exemption would be if a patient can prove that a prior pot conviction involved A, a reasonable amount of cannabis intended for medical use, and B, that the patient had a debilitating medical condition at the time. They can possibly get an exemption for previous convictions. Patients have to be at least 18 years old under the proposed rules and must have a bona fide relationship with the physician who authorizes them for medical marijuana. The state would have 180 days to act on an application according to these proposed rules. Patients would need to reapply annually. The law would prohibit the use of medical marijuana by police officers, firefighters, school bus drivers, and commercial bus drivers. Marijuana cultivation centers will be required to track inventory and have 24-hour security systems. They would be prohibited within 2,500 feet, more than twice the federal guideline of 1,000 feet, from schools, child care centers, or residential areas, and they could not sell marijuana directly to patients, only to registered dispensaries. Department of Health spokeswoman Melanie Arnold said she expects tens of thousands of applicants, as well as many comments from the public. Patient applications will be accepted from those whose last names start with A through L in September and October. Those whose last names start with M through Z may apply in November and December. After that, all applications will be accepted year-round. Proposals for adding more conditions to the list of qualifying ailments for medical cannabis will be reviewed by a 9-member advisory board of health professionals and one patient advocate. The Department of Health will then make the final decision. You can read those proposed rules. There's a link at the Hemp News article on hemp.org. In Tennessee this week, a medical marijuana bill sponsor there says she's very hopeful. Past medical marijuana bills have gained little traction in the Tennessee legislature. And as we told you last week, both Democratic sponsors of the last bill, proposed in 2012, lost re-election bids after their districts were redrawn by Republicans. But Representative Sherry Jones, a Democrat from Nashville, said she is very hopeful about her bill's chances this year. The bill, HB 1385, known as the Kooser-Coon Medical Cannabis Act, lists conditions from glaucoma to post-traumatic stress disorder as qualifying conditions, and also includes the phrase, any other medical condition or its treatment is certified or prescribed by practitioners and approved by the health department, which leaves that decision up to the physician. Under the bill, which outlines procedures for growing and dispensing medical marijuana, the program would be named Safe Access. This is about compassion, Representative Jones said. It's about giving people better health care, giving them a better quality of life. The bill is currently in the Tennessee House Government Operations Subcommittee. where it has 3 votes and it needs 2 more, according to Representative Jones on Wednesday. This year, with all the discussion, I think we might have a chance, she said. Members are getting lots of emails and letters from constituents who want medical marijuana. Even in hardcore Republican areas, they want to be able to have medical marijuana. The move can't come soon enough for many Tennessee families. In fact, it comes too late for some. One couple said they can't stick around to see what Tennessee does about medical marijuana. Penn and Nicole Madison have sold their landscaping business and last week moved their 22-month-old daughter, Millie, who has frequent seizures, and her 2 older brothers from West Nashville to Colorado Springs. The Madisons have seen at least 40 doctors, none of whom were able to definitely tell why Millie's brain stays in a constant state of chaos, seizing nearly all the time. They found a doctor willing to treat Millie with Realm oil, extracted from a low THC, high CBD strain of marijuana developed to combat epileptic seizures. Penn Madison says he got that idea from Dr. Sanjay Gupta's CNN special report, Weed. He and his wife had just come from another discouraging doctor appointment where the physician recommended increasing Millie's already large dose of Sabril, a pharmaceutical that carries the risk of vision loss. We want to give her every chance that these guys had, Nicole said, gesturing towards her 2 healthy sons. The meds knock her out, as they do with most children on them. They can't progress developmentally because they are unconscious the whole time. But do you knock them unconscious with the medication, or do you allow them to possibly die from a seizure? No Republicans have yet stepped forward to support the bill in Tennessee's GOP-controlled legislature. When asked last month about Colorado legalizing recreational marijuana, Tennessee Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey told reporters to expect problems in that state. But Representative Jones points out that Tennessee was one of a handful of states that passed a medical marijuana law of sorts in the early 1980s, joining the Federal Controlled Substances Therapeutic Research Program. The program was unworkable, however, and never served any patients. That law was repealed in 1989. The new bill would prohibit discrimination against medical marijuana patients by schools, employers, or landlords. Patients would be required to submit to criminal background checks, and some felony drug offenders wouldn't be allowed to take part. Patients who could qualify could possess a month's supply of marijuana. The law would not permit marijuana to be consumed on a school bus or near school grounds, on public transportation, or in any public place, in a substance abuse facility, or where the smoke could have adverse effects on the health and safety of children. Representative Jones admits that there's a certain lack of understanding among Tennessee Republicans when it comes to medical marijuana. They think it's all blowing smoke in babies' faces, I guess, she said. They don't understand that there are other ways to use marijuana, like tinctures and lotions. Some of the conservatives up here believe that it's not fair to keep these sorts of remedies from people who need them, Representative Jones said. That makes me very hopeful for the legislation. If you look at a list of diseases and sicknesses that medical marijuana can positively affect, it is a huge, long list of things. And in West Virginia, a medical marijuana bill has been introduced in the legislature. This law would allow people with debilitating medical conditions to access and use medical marijuana without fear of arrest. And a poll shows a strong majority of voters in West Virginia support such a measure. West Virginia Delegate Mike Minniepenny, a Democrat from Taylor, West Virginia, on Thursday, introduced a bill that would allow state residents with debilitating medical conditions such as cancer, multiple sclerosis, and HIV/AIDS to access and use medical marijuana if their doctors recommend it. This bill, House Bill 4264, would establish a state-regulated system of medical marijuana cultivation facilities and dispensaries to provide medical marijuana to licensed patients. There is no longer any doubt that medical marijuana is an effective treatment for a number of debilitating medical conditions and symptoms, according to Matt Simon, a legislative analyst for the Marijuana Policy Project, who is a West Virginia native and graduate of West Virginia University. No one deserves to be treated like a criminal for using marijuana to treat a serious medical condition, Simon said. Lawmakers concerned by medical marijuana should ask themselves what they would do if a loved one was suffering from a serious illness and a physician suggested that marijuana could help, he said. A survey conducted in December by Public Policy Polling found 56% of West Virginia voters support changing state law to allow people with serious illnesses to use medical marijuana if their doctors recommend it. And just 34% said they were opposed to such a law. The same survey question asked in January 2013 found 53% supportive and 40% opposed. So between January and December, support went up by 3%. A growing majority of West Virginians support this compassionate legislation, and we hope a majority of their elected representatives will join them in doing so, Simon said. It's time to stop criminalizing patients for using a treatment option that can dramatically improve their quality of life. And we learned this week that for the Super Bowl, we're going to have the first all-weed championship game. We have the Seattle Seahawks meeting the Denver Broncos, and it just so happens that those two teams hail from the two states where cannabis is legal. Now that the Seahawks have defeated the 49ers, everything's lined up for history's first all-weed Super Bowl. The Broncos and the Seahawks will meet at the Meadowlands Complex in East Rutherford, New Jersey on February 2nd. Both teams have 15-3 records. It would be hard for cannabis advocates to imagine a more favorable PR scenario. The only two states which have legalized, albeit in a limited way, marijuana just sent their NFL teams to the big game for all the marbles, a 420-friendly clash between rival stoner cities Denver and Seattle. If your state legalizes cannabis, maybe your team could be there next year. It's currently against the rules for NFL players to use cannabis, even if they live in states where pot is legal. At least that's how they've been enforcing the collective bargaining agreement, which only bars the illegal use of marijuana. Marijuana is legal in Colorado and Washington, and its medical use is legal in 20 states. Probably due to the National Football League's historically cozy relationship with alcohol manufacturers, the league has been unfriendly to cannabis. Though recent statements from NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell seem to be opening the door, albeit a tiny crack, to the future possibility of allowing medical marijuana. Goodell was asked if there would ever be a time when players in states where medical marijuana is legal would be allowed to use it. Instead of answering with a flat no, Goodell said, "I don't know what's going to develop as far as the next opportunity for medicine to evolve and to help either deal with pain or help deal with injuries, but we will continue to support the evolution of medicine." That's the first pot talk from the NFL since November 2012 when Colorado and Washington voters legalized marijuana. At that time, NFL spokesman Greg Aiello told USA Today that cannabis legalization, quote, wouldn't change anything. With viable legalization efforts underway in more than half a dozen states, including Oregon, California, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Missouri, New Hampshire, New Mexico, and Alaska, and 3 recent national polls showing majorities of American voters favoring legalization, 2014 feels very much like a turning point in cannabis politics. Before we go, let me point you at a must-read story this week. It seems ever so often, and more frequently lately, since legalization is being implemented in 2 states, we run into these alarmist stories about marijuana being poisonous to your cats and dogs, and scares a lot of people really badly and needlessly. No matter how many times it's debunked, this myth comes back again and again. Yes, marijuana will get your cat or dog very, very stoned, even to the point of being uncomfortable. It will not kill your pet. It's not toxic to your pet. These animals have cannabinoid systems just like human beings do. So while it may be unkind to give a big dose of marijuana to your pet, the pet is going to be fine in a day or 2. They may fall asleep. They may fall asleep for a long time. They always wake back up. Rover is not dead if all he's taken is marijuana. You do need to worry about things like chocolate and raisins if you have pets. Marijuana isn't one of them. It's never killed a dog or a cat, and it never will. Take a look at that article on tokesignals.com. I hope to see you again next week here. I hope some of you choose to send in your pretty bud picks for possible bud pick of the week. Until we meet again, stay lifted.